All right, welcome back. I hope you guys all had a great weekend. In this lesson, we're going to be continuing 9.4, which is solving equations by completing the square. Grading your homework this weekend. You guys did a great job, so you're off to a good start with this skill. Just as review, the process of completing this square is that we are adding on a c value, and to find that c value, we were taking whatever b was, dividing it by 2, and then squaring that result. So for example, in A, we took that b value of 10, cut it in half, which gives us 5, squared it, which gives us 25. And then this is a perfect square trinomial, so it's always going to factor into a binomial squared, and the second part of that binomial is always going to be half of the middle term. Okay, so just as a quick review of what we did on Friday. So the purpose of completing the square is to allow us to solve quadratic equations. We have learned one method so far, which is graphing and looking at the x-intercepts. We actually learned another method, which is taking square roots, but it has to be in a certain format in order to do that. So completing the square allows us to rewrite the equation into that format that would then allow us to take the square root of both sides of our equation. So in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at example 2. We'll do A, B, C, and D. And all of these equations have a leading coefficient of 1, meaning that all these x squareds just has a 1 as a coefficient instead of a different number. Tomorrow we'll look at how to do it if it's a different number. Okay, so the process for solving these, we'll focus on A for now. The process for solving this is to get your first two terms alone on the left-hand side. So we're going to add 1 to the other side just to kind of move it to the other side. So we're going to be left with x squared plus 4x equals 0. Okay? Oh, sorry, equals 1 because we added 1 to the other side. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're going to complete the square. So we are going to be adding on that c value. So again, we take our b value of 4, cut it in half, and square it. That gives us 2 squared, which is 4. So we're going to add 4. Now, really, really important, this is an equation. So in order to keep it balanced, if we add 4 onto the left-hand side, we also have to add it on to the right-hand side. So it's really important that when we complete the square, we add it to both sides of the equation. That's one of the biggest errors, is forgetting to add it on the right-hand side. So make sure, it's an equation, we got to keep it balanced, so add that 4 onto both sides. Okay, now we'll be able to factor this left-hand side. We completed the square, so we made it that perfect square trinomial. So this is going to factor into x plus 2. Okay, again, plus 2 comes from half of that b value, quantity squared, and then on the right-hand side, 1 plus 4 gives us 5. Okay, so now this is the setup of the equations that we solved in lesson 9.3. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to undo our quantity being squared. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. On the left-hand side, that leaves us with just x plus 2. On the right-hand side, that leaves us with plus or minus root 5. So again, we have to remember we have that plus or minus when we take the square root. Okay, we still need to get x by itself. So we're going to take away 2 from both sides. So that'll leave us with negative 2 plus or minus root 5. You can go ahead and leave your answer like this. Certainly if you wanted, you could then take your calculator and do negative 2 plus root 5, and then also do negative 2 minus root 5 to get your two decimal answers. But you can leave it in that exact format of just negative 2 plus or minus root 5. All right, let's look at another one. So example B, we have x squared plus 8x plus 10 equals 0. So again, in solving this, we want to have our first two terms alone on the left-hand side. So we want to take away 10 from both sides. So that'll leave us with x squared plus 8x equals negative 10. Okay, we want to complete the square, so we're going to add on an extra value onto both the left and the right-hand side. So we're going to take that 8, that our b value, cut it in half, and square it. That would give us 4 squared, which is 16. Okay, so we're going to add 16 onto both sides. Okay, now we're going to factor the left-hand side. Again, because it's a perfect square trinomial, it's going to factor into x plus 4 quantity squared. On the right-hand side, negative 10 plus 16 is 6. Okay, so again, completing the square allowed us to write it in this format, and now we can take the square root of both sides. Okay, on the left-hand side, that leaves us with just x plus 4. On the right-hand side, that leaves us with plus or minus root 6. We want to take away 4 from both sides, so that's going to give us negative 4 plus or minus root 6, and we can just leave our answer like that. Okay. All right, let's do D first, and then we'll go back to C. So in D, we have x squared minus 2x equals 3, so it's already kind of in that first step has been done for us, having the 3 on the other side. So we just need to start by completing the square. So we're going to be adding on that C value. Again, make sure we add it onto both sides. So we're going to take negative 2, cut it in half, and square it, which would give us a positive 1. So we're going to be adding 1 onto both sides. The left-hand side we can factor then. That'll factor into x minus 1, quantity squared. The right-hand side, 3 plus 1 gives us 4. Okay, now it's in that format where we can take the square root of both sides. That'll leave us with x minus 1 on the left-hand side, and then the square root of 4, we actually know that one. It's plus or minus 2. We can finally add 1 to both sides, so we get x is 1 plus or minus 2. Now in this case, we can go one step further because we know these answers. 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So we get two exact answers, 3 and negative 1. All right, in C, that's going to focus on one with fractions, so please watch this carefully. Again, I'm going to highly recommend, it's going to make it way, way, way easier, and your answer will be more accurate if you leave everything as fractions instead of decimals. All right, so in C, again, we got to do that first step of subtracting 1 from both sides. So we're going to have x squared minus 5x equals negative 1, and we want to complete the square, so we're going to add something to both sides. So we're going to take negative 5, cut it in half, and square it. Now that gives us 25 fourths. And we're going to leave that fraction. Okay. All right, on the left-hand side, we can factor it then. We know it's going to be a binomial squared. So that'll factor into x minus 5 halves. On the right-hand side, we need to compute this. So we can kind of come to the side. We need to do negative 1 plus 25 fourths. So that means negative 4 fourths plus 25 fourths, which would give us 21 fourths. So our right-hand side would be 21 fourths. Okay. Now we're at that setup where we can take the square root of both sides. The left-hand side, that'll leave us with x minus 5 halves. The right-hand side, and this is why we want to leave it as a fraction, we're going to get plus or minus. We don't know the square root of 21, so that's going to stay root 21, but we do know the square root of 4, which is 2. So we can rewrite this as plus or minus root 21 over 2. If you had written as a decimal, you wouldn't necessarily be able to write it this way, and it makes your answer less accurate. Okay, our last step would be to add 5 halves to both sides. So we would have positive 5 halves plus or minus root 21 over 2. You will often see the answer written with one extra step done. So because these both have a denominator of 2, we can write it as all over 2, and then our numerator would be 5 plus or minus root 21. Okay, so you can leave your answer like this, that's fine, or you could rewrite it like this, but you do need to use those fractions, again, because if you had written 21 fourths as a decimal, you wouldn't sort of be able to simplify that fact that it's a root 4, and that makes your answer not fully kind of simplified or not fully done all the way. So it is important that you keep it as fractions. Okay, so those are 4 examples. Again, if you have an answer that has a square root at the end, just leave it. But if it's a square root we know, like root 4 is 2, make sure you give those 2 final answers. All right, and then tomorrow we'll look at how to do these equations if the coefficient is not 1. So we'll look at if it's a 4 or a 3 or something like that. All right. Again, send me any Schoology messages if you need any help with anything. Make sure you're showing all your work on your homework and then submit it on Google Classroom. Thank you.